Good afternoon and welcome to Susquehanna National Heritage Area, creating a national destination for cultural discovery and outdoor adventure from the ground up. I'm Mark Platts, president of the Susquehanna National Heritage Area, and I'm joined today by Mike Doman, principal planner with Lancaster County Planning Commission, and Frank Dittenhafer, president of Murphy and Dittenhafer Architects. We're going to be the three presenters for this session. I'll start out with a general overview of our National Heritage Area, and then Mike and Frank will talk about specific projects as we go from the large landscape area to a regional trail down to a specific site along the Susquehanna River known as the Zimmerman Center for Heritage. I'm president of Susquehanna National Heritage Area, and I've been in that position since we started the nonprofit organization in 2003. I'm a native of York, now living in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. I have over 30 years of experience in urban planning, community design, landscape conservation, and heritage and outdoor tourism development. I have a bachelor's degree in urban and rural studies from Shippensburg University and a master's in urban and regional planning from the University of Florida. Mike Doman is a principal planner with Lancaster County Planning Commission. He joined the commission in 1986. He has responsibility for the land use and transportation team and is primarily responsible for issues related to growth management, comprehensive planning, parks, trails, and open space, planning, and natural lands preservation. He's a native of Pottstown, Pennsylvania, graduated from Bloomsburg University with a bachelor degree in geography and environmental planning. Frank Dittenhafer has been practicing architect for over 25 years and was one of the founders of Murphy and Dittenhafer Architects in 1985. As president of Murphy and Dittenhafer, Frank is responsible for the design and management of the firm's projects focused on adaptive reuse, historic preservation, higher education, housing, faith-based structures, and interiors and planning. After receiving a BS in architecture from Penn State University, Frank attended the University of Pennsylvania, graduating with a Master of Architecture, and Frank lives in York County. So I want to thank my fellow panelists for joining us today. I'm going to start off with an overview of the Susquehanna National Heritage Area. We are a two-county nonprofit organization working in York County and Lancaster County. Our nonprofit was founded in 2001 when our two counties were designated as Pennsylvania's 10th Pennsylvania Heritage Area. And the Pennsylvania Heritage Area program has been around since the late 1980s. It was started in Scranton, Pennsylvania as an economic development tool for the community of Scranton and Lackawanna County. There are now 12 Pennsylvania heritage areas across the state. As I said, our area was the 10th designated in 2001. Heritage areas are really about creating partnerships to enhance a region's sense of place and strengthen local economies through an asset-based approach to economic development, but it's all rooted in Pennsylvania's rich cultural and natural history. And it takes a designation by the governor of Pennsylvania to create a Pennsylvania heritage area. Some are very large, stretching across as many as 15 counties. Some are long corridors like Route 6 across the northern part of the Pennsylvania. And some are smaller, more compact areas like ours, which is just the two counties of York and Lancaster. We've been working since we actually got up to speed as an organization in 2002 and 2003. We've been working on a variety of projects across both York and Lancaster counties, and particularly along the Susquehanna River. We started out really focused on creating more of maps and guides and websites and interpretive features for the Pennsylvania Heritage Area. We also got very involved in land conservation efforts to preserve major threatened pieces of property that were along the Susquehanna River. We helped create new partnerships with everybody from National Park Service to some of the Chesapeake organizations to some of our local conservancies in the region, as well as our tourism bureaus. Our primary partner as a Pennsylvania Heritage Area is the Pennsylvania Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, which is the agency that manages the Heritage Area program across the state of Pennsylvania. Our projects have been from, again, large regional planning efforts, large conservation efforts in the region, down to maps, brochures, and websites to help highlight our regional history, highlight the recreational assets and outdoor opportunities in our area, both for residents and visitors, but to bring economic development to our communities. And the river early on was identified as one of our biggest assets for our region. The Susquehanna River flows 444 miles from Cooperstown, New York, all the way through Pennsylvania to the Chesapeake Bay in Maryland. And in our two counties, we realized early on with our partners that the Susquehanna is very close to York and Lancaster. Harris, of course, flows through Harrisburg. And our river towns at the center of our Pennsylvania heritage area provide an opportunity to introduce people to the river and make it an attraction. And our region between Lancaster and York Counties attracts over 10 million visitors a year. And if we can attract just 5% of those visitors to spend one more day in our region to experience the river, either kayaking or hiking or seeing historic sites or boating, that would mean 500,000 visitors a year would spend that extra day. And at a conservative $200 a day in visitor spending per day, that could mean $100 million of economic development into our region because of the river, because they stayed an extra day. And that's each and every year we could do that. But we knew 20 years ago that there was a lot of work to do to make the river a visitor-ready place. And that's been a big focus of our efforts and those of our partners over that time. As an organization, we actually reoriented our entire strategic plan about a decade ago and have since updated it twice to focus on making the river a national destination for outdoor fun and cultural discovery. Of course, as a nonprofit, we have to make sure we have the visibility, viability, and capacity internally to do that. But from the public's perspective, we really started focusing on placemaking, where we try to enhance the quality and appeal of the river's special places and landscapes, and tourism development, where we help increase the visibility and readiness of the river as a visitor destination. One of the primary goals of our placemaking focus early on in our strategic plan was to achieve national designation for our region to make us a national heritage area. And I'm happy to share that 2 years ago, and this time 2 years ago in 2019, our area, York and Lancaster counties, was included in the John Dingell Conservation Act that passed the US Congress and was signed by the President. And in that act were 6 new national heritage areas, including the Susquehanna National Heritage Area, designating York and Lancaster counties as America's 55th National Heritage Area. The National Heritage Area program is a little different than the state in that it requires an actual act of Congress signed by the President, not just a designation by the governor. And the National Park Service has developed some guidelines and guidance for national heritage areas for Congress and the local communities that take part in them. And the National Park Service basically says that these are places designated by Congress, administered through the Park Service, but managed by a local coordinating organization, which in our case is our nonprofit. National heritage areas tell nationally important stories with a grassroots approach to heritage conservation and economic development, and they support historic preservation, conservation, recreation, tourism, and education, very similar to a state heritage area. But I think most importantly, in many ways, is the fact that national heritage areas foster pride of place and enduring stewardship ethic by bringing the honor of national designation to a region. And each national heritage area focuses on stories of national importance within its region. In our case, we completed a feasibility study way back in 2008, before we even knew we were definitely going to be designated. And the National Park Service reviewed that plan to make sure we met the criteria to be a national heritage area. That study identified our region as having a number of major stories of national importance, with the Susquehanna River's role as a corridor of culture and commerce being front and center as a key part of our nationally important stories. But also included the role of York in the Revolutionary War, the role of our region in the Underground Railroad, Lancaster's unique role as home to James Buchanan and Thaddeus Stevens, 2 major icons of the Civil War era, our region's role as a gateway to the frontier for over a century as America settlement moved west, and our region's unique Amish communities that have really shaped the identity of the Amish community in the entire country has really been shaped by the Amish of Lancaster County and now York County too. So these are the stories of national importance that sort of got us to national designation. But a key part of our next step with that designation is creating a National Heritage Area Management Plan that is now underway with a consultant team and a group of local advisors, and it'll be underway into early 2022 to sort of map out what we will do with the national designation and the assistance of the Park Service, both financially and in technical assistance, and what we will do with our partners locally over the next decade or so to realize our true potential as a national heritage area. And even as we do that sort of long-range planning and big picture work over the next year or so, we have been operating a couple on-the-ground facilities for over a decade now, and these will continue to be important parts of our mission and goals, even as we become a national heritage area. The first of those, and Frank Didenhafer is going to talk more about this particular project of enhancing the site in his presentation. But our headquarters as a state and national heritage area is the Zimmerman Center for Heritage, which is also a National Park Service Visitor Education Center. This property was gifted to us over 15 years ago, and we were able to work with partners in National Park Service and other funders to transform it into a visitor center on the Susquehanna River with a great rivers visions of the Susquehanna art collection inside, as well as other exhibits and interpretive materials. And outside, we were able to add a dock and a water trail paddle access point on the river itself, a rain garden stormwater retention facility that filters all the stormwater from the site, and be a trailhead for the Native Lands County Park, which is a 180-acre county park right behind the building that also is the site of the last settlement of the Susquehanna Indians Day in 1675. So our visitors, before COVID, we had been over 4,000 visitors in 2019. We were expecting to exceed 5,000 last year. We were closed 100 days during the height of the initial COVID closures last year, but we did reopen in late June and have hosted over 2,000 visitors towards the end of the year. But typically, we think we can attract about 5,000 visitors. This was a significant increase after we started our partnership with the National Park Service, which is tied to the Captain John Smith Chesapeake National Historic Trail, America's longest water trail, which flows up the Susquehanna River. And in the last couple of years, the Zimmerman Center has also become host to annual field trips for local fourth graders, also in association with the Park Service. And we've now hosted over 2,000 kids here at the Zimmerman Center who are now junior rangers for the Park Service. And in the last 2 years, Zimmerman Center has been a site for river discovery boat tours, which is a pilot program we started in 2019 and continued in 2020 after a little bit of a late start due to COVID. And we were able to carry over 2,000 passengers on free boat tours of the Susquehanna River over those 2 seasons. Where they learn about local history, the environment, and the region here. And it's the only way in our particular area that folks can get on the river if they don't own a boat or don't paddle. It's been very successful, and we are now working on getting a bigger boat because of the demand for these tours. And we are in the process of acquiring this historic 1912 electric boat that has spent its entire life at the headwaters of the Susquehanna in Cooperstown, New York. And we are now working to bring that here to our part of the Susquehanna this summer and be able to carry more people and sustain it through a fee-based structure for the tours. And we're very excited to be moving towards this new experience on the river too. Our other facility we manage is the Columbia Crossing River Trail Center in Columbia, Pennsylvania on the Lancaster side, where we manage this visitor center for the Borough of Columbia, who built the center and asked us to partner with them to operate it. Columbia Crossing receives almost 25,000 visitors in a normal year, offers many programs, facility rentals, and also hosts 5th grade field trips every year on what's called Canoemobile, where we bring local kids and get them out on the river on these large canoes. It's become the gateway to river recreation and the Northwest River Trail that Mike Doman is going to talk about in a few minutes also. we have another major project we've been working on that we hope to realize in 2021. We've been working with Preservation Pennsylvania and the Conservation Fund to preserve a very important Underground Railroad site, the Mifflin Farm outside of Wrightsville, Pennsylvania. It's also a Civil War heritage site because of a Civil War skirmish that took place on the fields you see here. And the property was threatened with warehouse development from an adjacent warehouse project. And after some significant community controversy, the developers and property owners agreed to a 2-year moratorium. And our organization has been working with our partners to acquire this site. We've created a concept plan for the about 80-some acres of land stretching from the Mifflin Farm itself all the way to the Susquehanna River, where we actually own some property already. The site includes a very historic home dating to 1800 that was a documented Underground Railroad site. It includes the Susquehanna Discovery Center project to go into the old barn complex, and a variety of Civil War heritage trails and Underground Railroad heritage trails to highlight the local history and connect people to the river. The highlight of the project is really going to be the Susquehanna Discovery Center in the old barn complex. Murphy Denevre Architects has worked with us to create these concepts for how the barn can be transformed into a gateway visitor center for the entire National Heritage Area. The place folks can arrive right off of US Route 30, get oriented to all the stories and historic sites up and down the river and across York and Lancaster counties, and then be guided out to those places to go explore more, as well as transform the house into an Underground Railroad heritage site. We're very excited about this project. One of the unique features are the silo lookouts that will give folks an opportunity to utilize one of the silos in the building for circulation and get great views over the local landscape. It's a big project for us, the biggest we've ever undertaken. We anticipate that final acquisition costs that are coming together as we speak will be in the $5.5 million range, and then a major capital campaign to actually develop the center, resulting in a project of almost $15 million. This is a project we anticipate being a primary focus of our work over the next 5 to 10 years, and will help implement our National Heritage Area Management Plan. This will give us 3 sites along the Susquehanna: the Discovery Center as the gateway site, Columbia Crossing as the river recreation focal point, and the Zimmerman Center for its focus on the John Smith Chesapeake Trail and native lands and Indian history associated with the site there. So that's sort of the big picture overview of our National Heritage Area. And now we're going to transition to one of our regional corridor projects with Mike Doman and the Northwest River Trail project to follow. So I'm going to stop sharing. And then I think Mike is going to share his program and continue from here. Thank you, Mike.
Yes, thank you, Mark. Again, my name is Mike Doman. I'm a principal planner here at the Lancaster County Planning Department in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And I appreciate the opportunity to speak today. I have never spoken at a American Society of Landscape Architect National Conference, so it's a great honor to do so. Thank you for the invitation. I think Mark presented a really nice broad overview of the Susquehanna National Heritage Area. What I'd like to do is bring it down to another level and speak about a regional project in Lancaster County that is within the heritage area. In Lancaster, we're pretty fortunate to have a number of outdoor, long distance, multi-purpose recreation trails, either finished or soon to be finished. And the one I'd like to speak about today is located in the northwest part of the county, and it's called the Northwest Lancaster County River Trail. We often shorten that to just the Northwest River Trail because the other is such a mouthful to say. The Northwest River Trail was a project that started in the early 1990s and was actually completed in November of 2020. So we're newly minted, to say. It's about a 14-mile trail. So if you ride up and back, it's a 28-mile loop system there. And it has a 10-foot wide asphalt surface. We get a lot of questions why we have a asphalt surface the entire length of the trail. And the reason for that is because much of the trail is located in the floodplain of the Susquehanna River. The Susquehanna River does flood, especially in the springtime. The trail gets inundated and silt is deposited on the surface. And it's much easier to scrape that silt off a macadam surface rather than a crushed stone surface. Speaking of the Susquehanna, it is the longest river on the East Coast. And as Mark mentioned, it's 444 miles beginning in Cooperstown, New York, and ending at the mouth of the Chesapeake Bay near the town of Havre de Grace. It also drains half of the state of Pennsylvania and provides 50% of the fresh water to the Chesapeake Bay. So you can imagine how big this river is down in our quarter. And I think this trail takes advantage of the beautiful scenery along the river. However, what I'm going to talk about later, I think adds value to the, more than just a scenic trail. And I'll get into that in a little bit. The trail itself has 3 communities located adjacent to it. Columbia Borough, which has a population of just over 10,000 people. Marietta Borough, which is much smaller and has a population of around 2,600 folks. And then the unincorporated village of Bainbridge on the northern end has about 1,500 people. This trail is unique into the fact that it is not essentially a rails to trails project. The only rail line that the trail uses is an abandoned section of trail that is located in Chickies Rock County Park, which is that green area directly above Columbia Borough. The rest of the trail had to be assembled parcel by parcel for the most part, with the exception of the northern end, which utilizes an abandoned canal towpath for a portion of that trail itself. The trail, it begins in Columbia Borough at the southern trailhead, which is located next to Columbia Crossing Visitor Center that Mark spoke about. It heads north through Chickies Rock County Park, a facility owned and managed by the County of Lancaster, and then reaches Marietta Borough. When you reach Marietta Borough, you have the opportunity to use the alternate downtown route if you're interested in getting a bite to eat, drink, or just exploring the wonderful architecture of Marietta. Or you can ride the river trail the 6 miles to the village of Bainbridge. Between Marietta and Bainbridge is one of the most substantial, significant features along the trail, and that is the Shocks Mill Railroad Bridge, which I will come back to and speak to in a minute. And also then the final 3-mile section from Bainbridge to Falmouth is just filled with natural, cultural, and historic resources that I will speak to. The trail is unique from the standpoint also that it is not owned by one individual entity, it is owned by 6 entities, 4 municipal local governments, the County of Lancaster, and the Lancaster County Solid Waste Management Authority. And I think you can imagine that this fragmented ownership does present some problems in managing and operating the facility, but I will say that overall this group has been a pleasant surprise and has worked well together in managing and operating this trail. All the entities involved in the trail partner with the Susquehanna National Heritage Area. In fact, the Heritage Area coordinates all the events along the trail. So if there's a race or a run or a fundraiser or some kind of march, everything is coordinated through Mark's organizations at Columbia Crossing. So we are very grateful for the efforts that Susquehanna Heritage has participated in the operation of this trail. The Heritage Area also, obviously, with the Visitor Center, provides information for trail users who have never visited before, so they can stop in there and get information about how to use the trail. And also, they promote the trail very well on their website. And the Heritage Area also produces a brochure with a trail map on it. And I think we're including that in this presentation. So hopefully you'll get that after the presentation is completed. As I said, the trail is extremely scenic when it is not running through the historic towns that I mentioned earlier. It runs through either the forested floodplain of the Susquehanna River or the interface between the forested floodplain and the adjacent farmland. This creates this really beautiful contrast of a bucolic working landscape versus a natural area that is part of the floodplain itself. So it's really quite stunning the entire length. Since the Susquehanna River is on the Atlantic Flyway, you're bound to see a lot of birds when you're using the trail. There are bald eagles, there are ducks, there are Canadian geese and snow geese. And we also have a large resident population of black snakes. So you may see a black snake sunning itself on the trail to get warm in the morning, an occasional copperhead also, but as long as you don't run over them, they won't bother you. You might also take an opportunity to stop along the trail and see the rock climbers at Chickies Rock, which is very popular to watch. And we've also incorporated some artwork in the trail itself. In the bottom center there is a tiled mosaic that was created by some middle school students from a local school district. One of my favorite things also on the trail is the forest garden that was constructed by our local land trust, the Lancaster Conservancy. The forest garden has a variety of native crop producing plant species for animal habitat, such as walnuts, hazelnuts, serviceberries, pawpaws, and etc. So it's a real experience to walk through that. And the pictures in the upper right are just general photographs of the Susquehanna River along the trail, which is really beautiful everywhere. But the thing that I think sets this trail apart from a lot of other trails, even in Lancaster County, is the heritage of the transportation corridor and also the industrial heritage along this corridor. The trail itself follows the route of the old abandoned Pennsylvania Mainline Canal. That was a canal and railroad system that transported freight from Philadelphia to Pittsburgh and back. The section in Lancaster County that includes the canal is called the Eastern Division. And the Eastern Division of the Pennsylvania Mainline Canal ran from north of Harrisburg, Duncan's Island, as you can see it in that red circle, through the state capital, Harrisburg, and down to Columbia. So as you would anticipate, and comparing something to today's highways, there are a lot of businesses and industries that are stripped out along this corridor. And that's exactly happened back in the day when this was built in 1834. There are a lot of industries, there are a lot of businesses, there are a lot of iron furnaces and sawmills and so forth along this corridor. The remnants which exist today, which you can experience on the trail, which makes this trail experience a lot more than just a scenic trip. For example, in the northern end of the trail in Kenoi Township, you can see the remains of the actual canal lock that still exists up there, and also the towpath and canal bed, and still exist in certain sections. There is a furnace office that was restored about 15 years ago and is absolutely beautiful inside. There are iron furnaces along the way. The St. Charles iron furnace there in the middle is probably the best of those that remain. The Point Rock Tunnel is part of the abandoned rail line through Chickies Rock County Park, which is really interesting. And there is architecture all along this trail in the communities I spoke about earlier. This is one of my favorite buildings. This is the Marietta Railroad Depot. And this is about to be restored and adapted for event space. So I'm looking forward to that happening. Also, anytime we had the opportunity to incorporate any of the remnant heritage resources along the trail into the building of the existing trail, we did so. This happens to be a couple of piers that stood standing after a railroad bridge was abandoned and the bridge was removed, but we were able to incorporate that as part of our bike and pedestrian bridge over the Chickies Creek there. And I think it turned out really well. Used some context sensitive design on the liners, and I think they match the stone on the piers themselves very well. So we were very excited about that. Some of my favorite things along the trail include the White Cliffs of Kenoi. The White Cliffs of Kenoi obviously is a play off the White Cliffs of Dover, but unlike the White Cliffs of Dover, the White Cliffs of Kenoi are not natural, and they're not quite as large. But the views from the White Cliffs are absolutely spectacular, as you can see in the upper right-hand corner. It's stunning when you get out on there. The White Cliffs are actually a waste deposit of an adjacent quarry that produced limestone and dolomite for farming operations and steelmaking. The waste was dumped along the Susquehanna, built up over the years, and of course the business went bankrupt and we are left with the deposits here. It has been tested, it is non-toxic, but for some reason, nothing grows on it. And I noticed recently on Facebook, it has become a spot for young couples to get their engagement pictures taken there. So that's really interesting. Another one of my favorite features of the trail is the Shocks Mill Railroad Bridge. The Shocks Mill Railroad Bridge is an active rail line. It is a stone arch bridge that was built in 1905 and is just spectacular to be able to see this bridge. So it also presented a problem for building the trail because we either had to get over it, under it, or around it. Our initial idea was to get under this bridge and build a tunnel. That idea was rejected by Norfolk Southern, and they decided to allow the Solid Waste Authority, working with one of our local design firms, David Miller and Associates, to construct a underpass around the abutment on the eastern side of the river. That has worked out even better than we had anticipated because it's a really popular spot to stop and see the bridge and the water itself. The only thing I would like to do differently in the future is if we had built it a little bit higher, because it does tend to flood in the spring. And if we would made it maybe a little bit higher, maybe it wouldn't flood as much. When it floods, it shuts and severs the trail and you can't go any further or continue on. So I also just wanted to mention that a lot of trail advocates talk about economic development opportunities that trails create, and I will bear witness to that. I have seen all three communities benefit economically from this trail, especially Columbia Borough and Marietta Borough, whether it's expanding their services and lunch services at Shank's Tavern and McCleary's Public House, which have already existed, but we're expanding to take on the new customers from the trail itself, or the Pig Iron Brewery, which was built after the trail was constructed in Marietta. We had a Chickies Rock Outfitters come in and start a bicycle rental program and a kayak rental program, if you like. Starview Brewery is opening up in Columbia Borough, and also the Coffee and Cream Shop in the old passenger station in Columbia Borough is now a very popular spot to stop either before or after your bicycle trip. And the Coffee and Cream Shop is a very interesting phenomenon that I didn't anticipate when we were working on this trail, because that building had been vacant for decades. And what we're seeing as a result of the economic revitalization that this trail is encouraging is that some of the older buildings that were abandoned are now being adapted for reuse. So in a way, the trail has created a situation where it's supporting historic preservation, and that's exciting to me. So in closing, I just wanted to mention the lessons learned through this process and just cover that very quickly. One is patience. I think when you propose a long distance trail like that in smaller communities, there's an initial knee-jerk reaction to fight it. And after I think some time and perhaps some thought about this, a lot of these communities finally did come around. It took years in certain cases, but they did come around to accept the idea, and now the trail is a source of pride for a lot of these local communities. Partnerships. We could not operate without our partnership with the Susquehanna National Heritage Area. It would not function well, especially with events, and their coordination of the events is so important for this, because once you build a long distance trail like this, everybody's coming out for a march, a fundraiser, a race, and so forth. And if we were trying to deal with 6 municipalities coordinating those efforts, it would be disaster. So the partnership with the Susquehanna National Heritage has been terrific, as well as our partnership with the Lancaster County Solid Waste Management Authority. They have actually paid for and built certain section of this trail. So I encourage everyone, if you're building something like this, look for partnerships. Find a local champion. Having the county government try to work with and advise local municipalities is often difficult. If you can find a local champion who can talk to the local leaders and the directives are not coming from a higher level government, that certainly is a great help. So look for that local champion if you can. That certainly helps the process a lot. And again, trails can spur both economic development and historic preservation, as we have witnessed along this trail corridor. Buildings that have been vacant for decades are now being reused and restored, and that's just a great benefit that I never anticipated when we started this trail. And finally, perseverance. If you're working on a trail like this and a section isn't going well, skip to the next section and work on that and come back to the difficult section, because things tend to resolve themselves over time. So don't give up if you can't do one section because of some political pushback or something like that. Just move on to the next section and return to that. You'll get it done. Just have perseverance. So with that, thank you for the opportunity to make the presentation. I want to turn this over to Frank. So I will stop sharing.
And I will throw in there that Mike's perseverance, I think, Mike, you've been working on this trail for over 20 years?
Over 20 years, over 25 years. And I should have mentioned that that photo of me jumping in the air is actually the first time they had the opportunity to ride all 14 miles after it was completed in November of 2020. And I think I was able to get a full 6 inches off the ground right there. So very impressive. I was very excited to finish that trail after 25 years of work. So thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
Okay, thank you, Michael, Mark. And again, my name is Frank Dittenhafer. I am a founder and principal of Murphy and Dittenhafer Architects in York, Pennsylvania, and Baltimore, Maryland. And I'm going to talk a little more about the Zimmerman Center for Heritage. Mark gave you a little bit of a teaser, but we're going to take a little deeper dive into the Zimmerman Center, which is quite a wonderful, amazing place. A long level road just south of Wrightsville. If you've never been there, well worth the visit. It wasn't always a great place, or it hasn't always looked the way it looks now. If I can advance my slides here for some reason. Okay, there we go. It's the building or the house that's on the property is quite amazing and impressive unto itself. It was built between 1739 and 1758 by John Meyer. We think possibly around 1748. Very impressive English style, Georgian style exterior. But on the interior, there are quite a number of German inspired components. So unto itself, the building, the house, is very impressive. Again, it didn't always have this restored or magnificent appearance. It was, again, built in the mid 18th century. It was bought by Jacob Dritt in 1783, and the house and the 93-acre farm that went with it. And the Dritts lived there for a while, until 1817, to the point where the building is referred to quite frequently as the Dritt Mansion. And many other families, including the Bonhams, lived there over time. The Bonhams lived there until 1851. And the farm, the house and the property remained a farm throughout that entire period of time, well into the 1930s, without a lot of change. There was never any indoor plumbing. There was only electric on one side of the house. And it had a very sort of quiet existence without a lot of change. In fact, it was really unoccupied, and not really very noticeable, up into the latter part of the 20th century, when it was purchased by John and Catherine Zimmerman. And their intention was to repair it, restore it, and make it into a house along the riverfront for their family to utilize. And again, it's a bit nondescript at that time, but it had never underwent any major renovations, which is a good thing. The room layout had never been altered. And the Zimmermans were quite amazing people, really undertook a restoration of the entire house and property, and they did it the right way. They did a extensive archaeological excavation around the property, where they uncovered there's been over 10,000 artifacts uncovered, many of which are on display at the Zimmerman Center. They also uncovered the brick hearth of the original summer kitchen fireplace, and actually the footprint of the entire summer kitchen and beehive bake oven. And they undertook a very accurate reconstruction of the summer kitchen, and the oven and all components within that space. And they really did a great job, again, did it the right way in terms of the interior of the structure, and very sensitively inserted primarily on the second floor, some restrooms, and a kitchen on the first floor, again, in the right way that it could function as a house. And outside of the first and second floor, even the basement, the cellar, the vaulted cellar, is quite an interesting component. And here's how it looks today. It was, again, a vaulted cellar where the stonework was actually laid over the dirt, the mound of dirt that created that shape. And then the dirt was dug out. And this is what's there today. It's quite unique. And the window out from the cellar towards the Susquehanna River, it looks like this, the cellar window. And even the attic, which has occasionally been considered for some programming by Susquehanna Heritage. It's got a very unique German type truss. Liegender Stuhl, meaning lying chairs, is up there, intact, restored. And so it is the house itself, and the story of the restoration of the house, it is quite impressive, quite amazing. And in 2007, the Zimmermans donated the property to Susquehanna Heritage, really the precursor organization to Susquehanna National Heritage Area. Quite an amazing philanthropic endeavor. And so it continued to function as the headquarters of Susquehanna Heritage, and the property was owned by Susquehanna Heritage from 2007. Just prior to that time, a phenomenal traveling exhibit of art, all themes and paintings and prints of the Susquehanna, had been in the Zimmerman Center. And 2 years later, a significant portion of that exhibit became part of a permanent collection, both contemporary and historic art, that has been on display, continues to be on display in the Zimmerman Center, which is worth the trip in itself. So all that being said, and there were, I'd say the typical, for many years, the typical internal programming of lectures and receptions inside the building, functioned quite well. However, there are still issues with the property. As you can see in this slide, there was a driveway that went right through the front lawn, and the parking area, if you want to call it that, to the side and rear, was quite steep, unmarked, very unsafe. There were no pedestrian circulation patterns. There's no accessibility, and this was, public programming was taking place here. There was no accessibility provisions anywhere in terms of accessible routes or inside the building. And though it may be hard to believe, there really was no meaningful educational programming actually occurring along the waterfront. Even though the branding and the theme of Susquehanna Heritage was connecting people to the river and its history, this is what their riverfront looked like. There was really no physical connection at all. And so back around 2013, 2014, a series of studies and a lot of meetings, a lot of collaborative discussions were undertaken. My firm, along with landscape architects, YSM, and a few others, we started to map out a site enhancement project, one that would be fairly comprehensive and that it would try to achieve concurrently a number of objectives. One would be that the entire site would become accessible, and that it could be done, if possible, in a very thoughtful and kind of crafted way. In other words, not just plopping down a bunch of handicapped accessibility ramps. That could sort of be done with some sensitivity to the property and to the history of the building, and with some elegance. And there's quite a challenge, because the vertical grade differential from the waterfront to the main entrance to the Dritt Mansion structure was 20 feet, 20-foot vertical grade differential. There also were protected wetlands right along the river. There was clearly subsurface rock would need to be removed for any enhancements of the parking area. And there were going to be extensive municipal engineering requirements for any new driveways or any expanding parking, which is being considered. I might also say, I believe in addition to protected wetlands, there were protected turtles and protected frogs and other things that had to be considered in any type of enhancement. This is one of the early sketches. It still is showing the driveway coming through the front lawn of the property, and it's starting to map out, a waterfront connection, a waterfront pavilion, a floating dock, for watercraft, boats and watercraft to come to the Zimmerman Center. You could come there by water. Also, the idea of a canoe and kayak launching area, and a riverside garden to the north of the property, and a number of ways to connect all of these places on the Zimmerman Center with accessible pedestrian pathways. That all got formalized, through a number of variations into, I think, a very nice plan, an overall master plan for the entire site that was implemented through quite a interesting mosaic of public and private funding. But it did create, I think, the type of place that was envisioned and the type of place at the Zimmerman Center that you can experience today. There is a waterfront pavilion sort of tucked up at the northeast side, so that it is not detracting from the image of the house or the front lawn. The driveway in the front lawn is gone. There are pedestrian pathways connecting all of the places for educational programming or new historical displays throughout the property. That includes boardwalks on the other side of Long Level Road to the pavilion, boardwalks along the wetlands, along the canoeing and kayak area, and out to the floating dock, where boats can come up and dock. It includes accessible walkways that followed the existing stone wall that used to border the vehicular drive, but now is a pedestrian walkway, and additional walkways connected to Riverside Terrace or back around to the main entrance side of the Zimmerman Center, where the summer kitchen is, the west side, sort of the rear of the house, and all done in a way that blends with really the contours and the land, and in a way, in a 1 in 20 pathway grade, so that it is not overtaken by so many vertical or horizontal railing components. There is improved parking, or I should say even there now is legitimate parking that is not so steep that it's untenable. It's marked, it's accessible. There is wetland and rain gardens for taking care of all of the stormwater management out at the waterfront. And there is very natural indigenous landscaping that's been provided. So there was implemented very comprehensive, cohesive plan to enhance this really incredible site where Susquehanna Heritage had their headquarters, and to enhance clearly their programming and be connected to the river. So it's quite an undertaking. It took, I think, about a year and a half, and moving a lot of earth. Doesn't sound that glamorous, moving a lot of earth and changing grades and pathways, but it was. Anyone who remembers or what it kind of looked like beforehand, again, and there were, I think, quality choices made: granite curbing, bluestone, caps on walls, native field stone. What was implemented was done the right way. Again, a legitimate, accessible, easy to use parking area, boardwalks and pathways that are accessible all the way out to the river's edge. Again, other pathways replacing the vehicular driveway that now take you very nicely, pleasantly up through the front lawn area and connect to other places that have been created for gathering and educational programming on the site. That there are choices, there are many opportunities on the site that did not exist for those field trip programs. Again, and you can be safely dropped off at a number of locations. You can safely cross the road and get to the water. You can really interact very easily with this magnificent structure and the rooms and spaces inside, which again still offer some really great programs. Again, with some of the other designations that have occurred with the National Park Service, again, the opportunities have really blossomed in terms of the interaction with school children and field trips and other groups. It's been new signage, it's been integrated, and again, that blends in very nicely, again, with the native field stone, bluestone, the materials choices, a lot of time spent on the detailing and the choices of materials, even though, again, we're just talking pathways, we're talking low walls, we're talking railing systems. The intention was to do it all, in the most unobtrusive, most complementary manner to the property, to the house, that, it became clearly about the water, about the river, not about, something else. Just a good view of the, the eastern side of the property. You can get a good view of the accessible pathways, how it sort of connects up to the house and around the house, and the other options to the north side, the Riverside Pavilion. And the jewel, perhaps the little jewel of the project, was the Waterside Pavilion. There was no place, no pavilion out along the water. And when we started designing the pavilion, our intention was that it be very minimalist. We didn't want the built result to really be about the architecture, but really to be about the river. And so we implemented a design that in the end had 5 beams and 3 wood columns, and that was it. That was the structure. And it was completely open on all sides. And we integrated native field stone, again, for low walls and for some of the exhibition locations. Wood decking system, a simple folded zinc panel roofing, and again, built in the benches and interpretive panels using that same vocabulary. And it's interesting, it actually went up pretty readily. Now, I should mention there's some significant below grade structure, caissons and structure holding the pavilion up, or I should say resisting the ice damming and ice flows that have occurred for a number of years. And knock on wood, this little pavilion is held up without any issues. So more work maybe below grade than above grade, but it went up just as we thought. You could watch it go up during the winter time. Again, 5 beams and 3 columns. It really was more about how they came together, the detailing, the connections, keeping it as minimal and transparent as possible. Again, so that's telling the story of the river, and about what's happening there, what happened there hundreds of years ago. Again, that you can get to it a number of different ways, all very accessible routes, and it sort of quietly sits there, and it's a great place to sit and watch what's happening on the river. You can get there by land or by boat now. And again, it is not detracting visually from this very formal sort of composition of this incredible 18th century house that was there, and the sense of place in the landscape is really maintained. Again, you can get up close and personal and touch it. It's a very tactile design. It's very warm, with the wood. And again, it goes right up to the river. So Susquehanna National Heritage Area is very much connecting people to the river now. And again, it's a very peaceful spot, but it's right there where all the activity on the Susquehanna occurs at the same time. Again, it very quietly worked with the wetlands that were there, with native vegetation and the rain gardens. And the kids love it. It's quite a magnetic place to have programming. It's hard to really imagine the Zimmerman Center site without such a place at the river. So it's really worked quite well. Although it took some real effort to implement the enhancement project, but well worth it. All smiles. Strongly recommend you make a trip if you haven't been there to check it out. And with that, I'll stop sharing my screen and turn it back over to Mark.
Thank you, Frank. That was great. Of course, I get to work every day at this Zimmerman Center site and enjoy the site and the design and the landscape when I come to work. So it's been great to. We're now 6 years into this project being complete, and it continues to mature and look like it's always been here. Along with the house, of course. So thank you for that. And thank you, Mike, for your presentation on the Northwest River Trail. We're hoping that this presentation kind of shows you how we can work from a large landscape, regional approach as a national heritage area, but bring it down to real things on the ground, from the Northwest River Trail, the Zimmerman Center, to many other sites. I'm sharing now our contact information for myself and Mike and Frank. There's our emails and phone numbers if you want to follow up on any of this or learn more about the projects outside of this session, or just come down and visit us and enjoy the National Heritage Area, enjoy the Susquehanna, and visit these sites. In addition to the information presented in the presentation today, I also want to share, I think I can share this with you too. our website. I think you're seeing both, right? The contact information in our website. Our Susquehanna heritage.org is the website for the National Heritage Area. And you can go there and you can learn about the 2 visitor centers, the boat tours, other things happening in the region, as well as find all the maps and guides for various trails and attractions, including the Northwest River Trail that Mike spoke about, including the Zimmerman Center for Heritage and Native Lands Park and High Point Park and other sites. And there's also a Susquehanna Riverlands map and guide for the whole corridor through York and Lancaster counties that's available for download on the website. So with that, I think we've completed our presentation during the conference. I want to say appreciate the American Society of Landscape Architects listening to 2 planners and an architect speak for the last hour, but I want you to know I'm married to a landscape architect. So at least that gets me in a little bit. So in any event, thank you all for listening and participating in the chat, and hope the rest of your conference goes really well. And thanks for being here. Thank you, Mike, and thank you, Frank.
Thank you.
Thank you.